And welcome to the Flan Foundation for Mental Health. I'm your mental hygienist, Morgan Rector. Most people have a tendency to take things for granted. We should be grateful for whatever blessings that have come our way, yet we usually are not. One thing most of us take for granted is that we lack a disability. We take for granted the fact that we have our mobility, our senses, and all of our limbs. Any problems with mental illness are primarily episodic, and we don't struggle with some kind of learning disability. Illness is temporary rather than chronic or terminal, and our ability to enjoy life is not curtailed by ceaseless pain or nausea. What if you could no longer take one or more of these things for granted? What if you lost a limb or your mobility? Imagine you woke up one day and you couldn't see. Think about what your life would be like if you were distracted by endless physical agony and couldn't enjoy your favorite hobbies and interests. My guests today have experienced the hardships of acquired disabilities and continue to do so. Rob Steves and Melanie Tadeo are very much alive, but when they acquired disabilities, they lost a great deal. And they faced many obstacles along the path they traversed toward living fulfilling lives today. They made many adjustments and had to alter their plans for the future, yet here they are in the future, living their lives and finding happiness and fulfillment on their own terms. Now we take an in-depth look at how their experiences with an acquired disability has brought them to where they are today. Welcome, Rob and Melanie.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, thank you.
So first of all, I'm going to ask you to describe the nature of your disability and how it came about. I'll start with you, Melanie.
Sure. At the age of 21, I suffered a massive stroke that left me completely paralyzed on the left side and legally blind.
And Rob, how did yours come out?
When I was 16, I was in a car accident that basically, without going into the long story, left me paralyzed from the waist down.
And what was your immediate emotional reaction to the reality that your disability was going to be a lifelong condition? Was it traumatic? I'll start with you, Rob.
Well, when I came to, because after they did the number of surgeries and that, they had me doped up on a bunch of morphine for like a month and a half or 2 months or whatever. Anyways, when they weaned me off of it and I finally came to, my parents told me that I was paralyzed from the waist down and I couldn't talk at the time because I had a trach in. So I just basically wrote on a piece of paper, yeah, I know, so what? I just accepted it from the beginning because there was no point in doing anything else and, whining and crying about it. It is what it is, and I just carried on.
So have you always been a very well-adjusted and resilient person in that regard? Any kind of hardship that came your way, you could deal with it pretty well right away? Or?
Oh, in the beginning, the first reaction is usually, you freak out, but I get over that fast, right? And then it's like a 10-minute thing, and then it's like, okay, this is what it is, just deal with it and move on, right? There's no point in, you're not going to change it. Feeling sorry for yourself or being depressed about it, or just sitting there and wallowing in self-pity over it isn't going to change anything. It's just going to make your situation worse. So I just look at it as, move on.
Yeah, that's a good attitude to have. So Melanie, was it traumatic for you when you were informed this is not a temporary condition, this is something you're going to have to live with for the rest of your life?
Absolutely, it definitely was. So I woke up with no vision at all, and I couldn't see anything, and I couldn't understand what had happened, and nobody wanted to say the stroke word to me because a stroke was an old person's disease. So I didn't know what was going on. So I was really frightened. I couldn't see, I couldn't move my left side of the body, and I couldn't communicate because I was intubated. I had the breathing tube in. So when I finally was able to get somebody to tell me what was going on, I was in denial. I was like, it's going to come back. It's going to come back. It was fine. And then after some time, I realized, wait a minute, it's not coming back. So I think I went through the whole grieving process, the different stages of grief, the anger. I did a lot of why me at the beginning. Like, what did I do wrong? I really analyzed my life. At 21, you think, of course, it had to be the one bad thing you've done in your life or whatever. But after I got past that whole, like Rob said, mine wasn't 10 minutes, but it was still very short. I just wanted to be normal. obviously nothing like my old life would come back, but another version of it.
And so how did you feel about your future at that point? Start with Melanie. You envisioned, okay, whatever dreams and plans you have, some of them may have to be modified, and some you may just have to forget about altogether. So walk me through the process of reconfiguring your plans for the future at that point.
Well, I always joke around and say I had stroke brain. So what I mean by that is you think you can do everything you used to be able to do, but really you can't. So in my mind, I was going back to university. That was in my mindset. The reality was I couldn't do that, but I was focused, and my dream was to be a teacher, and nothing was going to stop me. So I still applied for teachers college, and I still went back and finished university, graduated, all that stuff. But I think I wasn't going to divert from my plan because of the stroke brain, but the reality is I had to realize I had to do things differently, and that was a process.
And Rob, how did it change your future? What plans, and then how did those plans have to be modified?
No, initially in the beginning, not much, because I was 16 and I still had to finish high school and that, so it was more of, because I was in Kingston, that's where they airlifted me to after the accident. It was more like get back to Toronto was my main goal. And then once I got back to Toronto, it was, okay, do rehab, learn how to move in the chair, maneuver, and then get back to school. After that, it was more where things needed to change because I was looking to go something into the emergency services, police, fire, ambulance, so I couldn't go that route. So it was just, I was still young enough where it was, your whole life's ahead of you, right? Mm-hmm. So you can pretty much make the change easily. It's like, okay, well, you can't do that now, so what are you going to do? And then it was just sort of figure it out from there. So it wasn't that, it was big because I couldn't go where I wanted to go, but I was still young enough where it was easy to make that change without too much trouble, because I was still high school, right? So, I took an extra 2 years in high school and just didn't make a difference, so.
Oh, that's good. Did you have any hobbies or interests, like sports or anything that would have required a great deal of physical effort that now you just couldn't do or had to?
Well, the only thing I never played really organized sports. I just played pickup stuff with my friends, pickup basketball, baseball, hockey. So, the one big thing was me and my buddy Brian would always play hockey out in front of his place, or on Saturdays we would get together with a bunch of other guys and go to it in the middle of the winter while we did it in freezing weather. We would play hockey in a tennis court. And so I couldn't do that anymore. I couldn't play hockey in front of his house anymore, stuff like that. Put an end to that, but no really organized sports or anything along those lines. I didn't go to Scouts anymore. I was heavily involved in Boy Scouts, but didn't do that anymore, which was okay because I was hitting that age where you transition out of that because the groups that were available at that time for that age group, we didn't have any in my area. I would have had to go further out of the area, and it just wasn't feasible. So those would have come to an end anyway. So it was mainly I missed playing pickup hockey with my buddy because we did it like every day. So.
And Melanie, in terms of your hobbies and pastimes, at the time that you had your stroke, did you have to give up any of those things?
Yeah, actually, I was kind of pardon the pun, I was studying visual art in university, and I lost my vision. So I remember in rehab them saying, okay, you can still do art. I used to draw and I used to paint. Here's a sketchbook. Draw this life of a vase with flowers. And I tried, and it was the hideous thing. It was so disproportioned because I couldn't see out of my left eye, and everything didn't look real. And I was heartbreaking. And then my art teacher from high school came and she put a slab of clay in front of me. She's like, go ahead. You can still do art. But it wasn't the same. So I gave it up. I was discouraged. I think part of the creativity part of my brain was damaged by the stroke as well. So I didn't have the same desire. Now, that being said, would I probably have continued on? Absolutely before. So I think that was one of my first big obstacles of realizing I wasn't the same person.
That said, though, There are a lot of artists who have painted as if they couldn't see very well.
Very true.
like Monet, his paintings look like they were painted by someone who wasn't wearing their glasses. Really.
True.
So, did having your newfound disability affect your self-esteem? I'll start with Rob this time.
I'm trying to think back. It was a long time ago. Yeah, I'm sure it did. I can't really recall any instances where it affected my self-esteem because, when I went back to school, it was, everybody was welcoming. I was well known before just because, not because I was popular or anything like that, because trust me, I was not popular in high school. People knew of me more than they knew me because I was on student council and stuff like that, right? So it was, and I was the only guy in a wheelchair. So it was kind of like everybody knew the only guy in a wheelchair. It wasn't like you were, the person with the limp or whatever the case was. So everybody was encouraging and the teachers all knew me and everything like that. So going back, it was helpful from that point of view because once I got back into school, everybody was just so welcoming when I got back. And then I just jumped back into, I had the swim team I was on before, so I couldn't do that anymore. But they still wanted me out poolside at, the swim meets and stuff like that, cheering the team on. So I had a good group of friends that were welcoming when I went back. So I'm sure the self-esteem was low, but it was tough for it to be low just because of the way everybody around me was. And then the next year I just jumped right back into student council and ran with it as I did before. So
yeah, you were lucky to have a very supportive environment like that. Yeah,
definitely.
So Melanie, did your experience acquiring a disability affect your self-esteem at all?
Oh, definitely. So 21, a woman, the next stage of your life is to get married and have kids, have a family. And all of a sudden now, I was in a relationship when this happened, but when that ended, it's like, how am I going to meet somebody? How am I going to, you can't go to a bar and make eye contact anymore. Not that I want to meet my significant other in a bar, but again, that whole, how do I look, not being able to do my makeup, stuff like that. That was a big change for me because, of course, as a young woman, that's very much about what you wear, what you look like. And again, because of the weakness on my left side, I wasn't able to exercise the same way as I would have been. So the weight went on, and the insecurities are there. Nobody's going to want to marry somebody with a disability. Nobody was going to do, just those. I think any woman would have an insecurity, but then having this added point on. But then I realized, like Rob, having a very supportive environment with my family, my good friends, that really, truly anybody would be lucky to, marry me just for who I am as a person. It's not about what's on the outside. It's just being a good person. But finding that right person that can deal with being married to someone with a disability is also another thing. But so yeah, self-esteem was definitely affected.
And speaking of your family, how did they react initially when suddenly you've lost your sight and it turns out you've had the stroke, and this is presumably not something that's happened within your family before at all. No one's had an experience like that. So how did they react? How did they adapt to the situation?
It was really interesting. My parents were devastated, of course. Nobody wants to see their child hurt or go through anything. My dad blamed himself, which was not his fault, clearly. They went into survival mode. But my mom and dad became very overprotective. They wanted to guard me from any other trauma. The reality is they had also, suffered as well along with me. I have 3 younger sisters, and it all affected them all very differently. The one that was closest to me in age took on the big sister role, and she was really good, and she made sure I had everything I needed. But you could see there was some resentment because I was getting all the attention. But she didn't let it get in the way. She just did what she had to do. Then the second sister hated me. She told me, "I hate you. You stole my sister," because that was her way of coping. I was a different person. And it took us a number of years to get over that. And then my baby sister, who was 11 at the time, just wanted to know what happened and how she could help me. And she was so unconditionally loving and we're all very close, but it hit everybody differently. And my dad's way of coping was to work all the time. My mom's was to hover. My sisters were either help too much or just stay away. So it was interesting.
So the one who said that she hated you, do you think maybe she was jealous of the attention you were getting as well? Or?
No, because my sister and I were very, very close before the stroke. And I was the cool sister that used to drive around in a cool car and listen to cool music. And now I couldn't drive, I couldn't see, I didn't want to go anywhere, so I couldn't do all the things I used to do. So to her, I had stolen the old sister away. So, of course, it was natural to her to hate me.
Oh, I see. And Rob, your family had to completely readjust their lifestyle now that you had certain mobility needs. So how do they react to this new situation?
I only really saw for the first part my mom because, like I said, I was in Kingston, so my dad had to come back to Toronto to work, and my sister had school, so I only saw them on weekends and stuff like that. But when I finally got back to Toronto, it was, there was obviously adjustments there that needed to be made, but it wasn't. My dad worked a lot to begin with before. He worked a lot afterwards. And then my sister, she adjusted, but she didn't totally adjust because she kept leaving stuff in my way and would leave stuff on the floor. And, it got to the point where I'd come in and her shoes would be there and she wouldn't put her shoes, so I'd just chuck them down the basement or throw them out on the front lawn because I finally got fed up. And I said, my mom was the same way. She actually left stuff in my way too. Now, it wasn't on purpose. It wasn't to try to trip me up. Well, I can't really trip me up, but anyways, you know what I mean? But it was just sort of they would come in, drop their stuff, and go along, right? Not put the shoes on the rack or whatever. So finally, it got to the point where I was just done with it. So when we had the addition built, as soon as you come up the stairs, there's the stairs that go down to the basement. So they often found their purses, backpack, shoes down the bottom of the basement stairs because they were left in my way. So I got fed up with putting them back, so I just chucked them down the basement stairs, and whatever broke. It wasn't my problem. So they were kind of forced to make that adjustment because they didn't want to have to go down the basement every single time they wanted to find their shoes. So there were adjustments there that needed to be made. Outside of that, my grandfather was the same. He was quiet and just, stayed out of everybody's way, and he was just the same way before and after. And then my grandmother was kind of the hovering type, and all the other family members were like, oh, if, it was a family get-together, it's like, oh, well, we got to get Rob this, we got to get Rob that. My mom would just sit there and be like, let him do it on his own. Just, he wants food, he can go find it, because that's the way it was, right? It wasn't, I didn't want people, everybody wanted to push me like it was, some toy, and I'm just like, I would get angry because they wanted to push me. So it was things along those lines, but they eventually adjusted, and they knew not to touch me and everything like that, and just leave me to fend for myself. And if I wanted help, I would ask for it. So,
yeah, my mother has a physical disability. She's also has compromised mobility. She uses a power chair to get around. Excuse me. And what I found as I had to adapt to this was that, in a way, her disability became my disability too by default. In terms of, if we're going to go somewhere together, there's things that I can't do just because she can't do them. So did that affect the dynamic in your family as well?
Not really, because we really didn't go many places to begin with. The biggest thing was going to church because it wasn't accessible. We didn't want to change churches, so my dad had to take me up and down the stairs and stuff like that. That was really the only big change. Which once we figured out how to do it, the easiest way, whether it was the right way or not, it was the easiest way, then it wasn't a big deal, In the beginning, it was a little bit of adjustment. It would take us a few minutes, 5 minutes to get up the stairs or what have you. Excuse me, but then once we figured out how to do it the way it worked best for us, it was like up and down in 2 minutes. And, just get out of the way. People wanted to help, and we're just like, no, just move along and just get off the stairs. Let me get upstairs and get upstairs, and that was it. So there wasn't a lot there because I could easily transfer in and out of the car without too much trouble. It was just sort of like I get in, they throw my chair in the back, we go on, right? So
there is such a thing as being too helpful, isn't there?
oh, definitely there is, yeah. And I see a lot of times people. I mean, everybody's intention is good to help. But the thing, though, is if you help too much, then the person with a disability becomes lazy. And they don't do anything for themselves. And then that's where the stigma comes from, because after a certain amount of time, everybody, the person in the chair just expects, or whatever, that has the disability just expects everybody to do it for them. There's things that I will have people do for me just because it's easier. Like if I've forgotten something downstairs, rather than me going down to get it myself, I'll just ask my sister to get it, or, whoever's there at home. Can you go down and grab this, like my cell phone from the van, just because they can do it in less time than I can. So, but for the most part, yeah, you're right. You can be too helpful.
And how did your family, did they have trouble adapting to your situation, Melanie, in the sense that, well, now, it's like they may want to see a movie, but what are you going to get out of a movie? And, or go into the art gallery or something like that.
Yeah, there was definitely adjustments, mainly when it came to guiding, because I still obviously wasn't comfortable using a cane to be independent at that point. Forgetting to tell me there were stairs, that was a big one. Them not realizing the things like why I would be walking into the wall or riding when I was in the wheelchair into the wall, and just not taking the extra time being patient with me. It's kind of funny now because I'm like, go, 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 let's go, let's go, let's go. And they're like, okay, for someone who take a long time, you're very pushy now. But the movie thing, yeah, I sat through lots of movies I couldn't see. You kind of just adjust because you want to be, quote unquote, that normal. You want to be part of everything, right? But now they know better, and they're really much better at guiding. And I'll just speak up for myself, whereas before I didn't want to rock the boat. So now I'll just say, no, not going to movies.
Yeah, I've heard of this phenomenon. A lot of people with disabilities feel like they actually have to be accommodating to the people around to a certain degree. Like, there's a comedian named Robert Schimmel. He had a son that passed away. He had cancer. And this boy was very ill, but yet whenever his family came in, he made sure to smile and be perky for everybody, and they didn't expect him to. So have you ever felt like I should make things a little easier for everyone else, even though you shouldn't have to?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's, it's also making them feel more comfortable, because at the end of the day, it's going to make the situation easier, faster, whatever it might be. It's just better sometimes just smile and nod and move forward. But there comes a point where you have to do that teachable moment and say, you know what? No, this is not the way it has to be. It has to be this way because of this. My sisters still to this day don't understand why I start to do things days before. Like, for example, I was going on a vacation with them, and I was living at home at the time, and I asked for my suitcase a week before. And I couldn't go downstairs and find it. Somebody had to go get it, and they couldn't understand why I wasn't just waiting till the night before. Well, it takes me forever to figure out what clothes are what, figure out how to pack it. I can't do things the same way as anybody else.
Yeah.
And I stress about having things done on time. So that's a big thing. Even, I get ready well before I'm going to go anywhere, still to this day. Put my shoes on, and my husband always laughs at me. He's like, what are you doing? He's like, when are you leaving? I said, an hour. Well, why are your shoes on? Well, because what if it takes me long? I always say it takes me longer. It probably doesn't take me as long as it used to, but in my mind, be ready.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and going from family relationships to friendships, one thing that happened to my mother after she acquired her disability was that she lost friends. People stopped coming around as much. A lot of it had to do to adapting to the new reality of the disability. So a lot of storefronts are not accessible. That's one issue, but there were other issues as well. They just couldn't spontaneously do everything they used to do. So I'm going to ask you if you lost any friends as a result of your disability. Start with Melanie.
Yes, I did. I was in university, and there was a lot of university friends that just weren't comfortable around somebody with a disability, and they couldn't cope. It was them that couldn't cope. I had changed, but I hadn't changed as a person. But I had some people be very honest with me and say, I'm sorry, I can't handle this. But also ones that just stopped calling, and that was heartbreaking. But my good friends, like from high school, elementary school, they stuck by me. I have like 3 really close girlfriends and a couple of guy friends. They've stuck by me no matter what. And they roll with the punches. Yeah, things change. I have to plan a bit more because of accessible transportation, or they have to come get me. I can't go wherever they would go usually. So those things have changed, but they've been really great about it.
Oh, that's good. And Rob, you were in high school at the time, and you said, so it was a very supportive environment, but did it affect any of your friendships at all?
Well, it did. Well, it was weird because it was shortly after the accident was a transition time anyways, because I was grade 11 at the time, and then there was 1 more year left, and then, people were moving on to college and university. So there were some friends, like swim team people that I hung out with before, that we used to have swim team parties like almost every Saturday and stuff like that. Those people drifted away. But again, they were more the older ones that were on the team. So I think they would have gone away anyways because they had left. They were, grade 12 OAC, well, grade 13 at the time, which doesn't exist anymore. But some of the people that went through school at that time will know what I'm talking about. They would have left anyways. My one good friend, Brian Anderson, he stayed with me. He went off to university. We're still friends today. He lives out in BC now. We still talk. My other good friend, Brian, the other Brian, because there was 2 of them, which got confusing. But we're still friends today. But it was weird because they left school, and they were the 2 that I mainly hung out with. When I came back after the accident, I didn't hang out with them like I did before because they sort of moved on to other friends as well. And some of the friends that they ended up becoming friends with were ones that we were kind of enemies. I was not an enemy, but we didn't get along. And they made fun of me and stuff like this before, which was kind of weird that one of them became friends with those guys because they didn't like him before either, but then they liked him. I don't know, it was weird. But then because I was still in high school, I developed a whole new group of friends, which we're down to 3 of us now. There was probably about 8 of us or 10 of us back then, but now we're down to 3 or 4 of us now. But that's just everybody moves away and stuff like that, right? So it was a weird time. I did lose some friends, but my main ones, the 2 that I mainly talked to, they stayed, and so that was good.
So you find out where your real loyalties lie.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I expected to lose people because, I didn't expect anybody to stick around, to be honest with you. Even my friends, the 2 Bryans, even though I had known one of them since kindergarten. I mean, we were enemies in elementary school. We fought every day, literally fought. We spent more time in the principal's office than we did in class for 2 years. But then we became best friends. I don't know. But I expected to lose everybody just because I figured, why are they going to want to hang out with me when I can't do everything? I can't play soccer. I can't play hockey. So I expected to lose anybody. So it was a surprise that they stuck around.
Oh, that's great. We touched on this lightly earlier, but what impact did your disability make on your career plans, starting with Rob?
Well, again, like I said, I was planning on going into emergency services, so then I had to revamp everything. I really had no idea what I was going to do. But then people are like, oh, you got a good voice. You could go into radio. Thankfully, they didn't say, you have a face for radio. You should go into radio. They did the more positive angle. So, that's sort of where people said it to me. Enough people said it to me that I thought, okay, what else do I have to do? I don't really have any other talents. There's nothing really that interests me. So let's try the radio thing. So I applied to college for that. And then just sort of went down that route. Didn't end up getting into what I wanted to just because of medical, but it was something, right? So.
And Melanie, how did you have to adjust your career plans, if at all?
Well, I'm still a teacher, which is good, but I planned on being a visual art teacher. Well, that didn't work out. I probably could have, but it would have been very subjective. But I just focused on special education, and it's funny because when I was in teachers college, I was really insulted that the professor said I should do my placements with kids with special needs. I was like, how dare you say I have to because I have a disability? I was really upset by that. But in fact, I loved it, and that's where my heart is. Like, that's where my passion is, and I think I do it well. So I think same path, just different detour.
You should have started a new class. Visual abstract art teacher.
Well, there you
Yeah,
go.
that would have been good. There you
time.
go. There you go.
Yeah, because I think I'd get as much out of a Jackson Pollock painting with no sight as I do with sight.
There you go. Exactly. And some things that are out there as painting these days that they call art. I mean, just fling paint on a canvas, and it's worth $500,000.
So how has your disability affected your love life? Did your partners, current and former, find it difficult to accept or adapt to your disability? Start with Melanie.
So, yes. So my first husband, he was the first person that accepted me, air quotes, with my disability. And he told me he loved me, and despite the disability, I should have run in.
How'd you feel about that?
Well, he didn't say it in so many words. His family said that.
Oh,
it's
I
not
see.
your fault you're
Wow.
handicapped. Yeah, it was quite the meeting. Anyways, I wanted to be normal. All my friends were getting married, so I got married for all the wrong reasons. But in that moment, I thought he understood it. As time went on, I kept hearing, you need me because you're a disability. You're disabled. You need me because of this. You can't see. You need me to do this. The reality is I didn't need him. I just felt that I needed him. So that didn't last. Now my husband now is amazing, supportive, and doesn't even look at my disability as disability. It's just, okay, Melanie might not see that something's messy. I'll clean it up. It's not an issue. We struggled at the beginning because I wanted to be so independent, and he just wanted to not help me, just do what he does because that's what he feels is a way of showing that he loves someone by doing rather than talking. So we struggled with that, but it's amazing. And you know what? I feel completely equal, whereas in the first marriage, I didn't.
Oh, that's good. Rod, did you have a girlfriend at the time of the accident?
No. Actually, they pretty much didn't. There was nothing with girls at that point, just because, I was not a popular person. I was an overweight kid or teen. So, it was actually kind of funny. The girls that I liked before the accident, I wouldn't get the time of day from them. But then after the accident, there was one who, anytime she saw me in the hallway, she would stop me and talk to me. Yeah. Even if it was I was on my way to the washroom. Well, supposed to be in class, but you know how can I go to the washroom or can I go get a drink just to get out of class, right? Yeah. So I'd be doing that, or I'd be late for class. She would see me and then talk to me for 15 minutes and make me even later for class. And I'm like, wait, you wouldn't even give me the time of day before, but now you're like chatterbox. I couldn't figure it out, but it was, in the beginning I didn't, there was girls that I liked, but it wasn't, I wasn't an outgoing person, so I wasn't making moves on anybody or anything like that. There was, I had one girlfriend before the accident, but we were broken up long before that. Had a couple afterwards. One of them, I think the disability got in the way because it wasn't until I went away to camp, and then she's like, I don't really like him anymore, and she decided to dump me while I was away at camp, which really sucked because there was a girl at camp that was into me, but I didn't make any moves on her, and I liked her, but I didn't make any moves because I had the girlfriend back home, and then I get home and she dumps me, and I'm like, thanks. I could have done something with this girl, at camp or whatever. So that was kind of annoying. But yeah, so it affected me and didn't really affect me in the beginning. So
I wonder if there's also a phenomenon where, the opposite of that, where instead of being maladaptive, someone's patting themselves on the back for being the partner of a person with a disability. I'm such a good boyfriend or girlfriend because I'm there. And I could have chosen someone who didn't have a disability, but I did choose someone with a disability.
Oh, I'm sure it's like that. It's just like earlier we were talking about, firefighters who go and set fires to be the one to rescue people from it. I'm sure there's, boyfriends, girlfriends, spouses, whatever out there that think that I'm a better person because I I'm dating somebody with a disability, or I'm married to somebody with a disability, or whatever the case is.
The poor me thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Look at my charge sheet.
So have you experienced discrimination of any kind because of your disability? It could be workplace or on the street, anything. Start with you, Rob.
Oh yeah, especially at work. There's been times where it's been done right to my face. There's been times it's done behind my back. You know, there was one time just recently, customer. I work at a big box store. I won't mention the name, but I work at a big box store. And customer goes up to one of the other staff, and she says to him, "Oh, I need help with," I forget what it was. It was something in my department. I work in the seasonal department. And she asked a question about something like that. And he's like, "Oh," he says, "that's not my department. I'm plumbing, but Rob will be able to help you out." And it just so happened that I was coming down an aisle, and I rolled out into the open, and he pointed to me. He's like, "Oh, Rob over there, he'll be able to help you out. Go talk to him." And she looked at me, and she looked at him, and she said, pardon my language, but she said, "What the hell can he do for me?" And this guy, his eyes got big, and he didn't care about, he was a manager actually too. He didn't care about customer service. He was a former manager. He stepped down from the position because of health issues and that, but he just ripped this woman to pieces. Mm-hmm. And, you know, the customers, and when he was done, you know, she walked away. She came over. I didn't know about it at the time. She came over. She asked me for, you know, "I'm looking for this." I gave her the usual level of customer service I give anybody that's nice to me. And she walked away happy. And then he came up and he told me, and I was like, "Yeah, if I knew that." I mean, actually, I still would have given her good customer service just because I would have thrown it in her face. But, you know, even the customers afterwards were like, you know, "Thank you for doing that," because that was rude of that woman to do it. And I had, you know, there was another guy that he wanted something outside. I came out, and he wanted soil. And I said, "How can I help you?" He's like, "How are you going to help me?" And I'm like, "Well, I don't know. What's your question? I can't tell you how I'm going to help you." He asked me, he's like, "Well, I want soil." And he's like, "How are you going to load soil for me?" I'm like, "With my arms? How else would I do it?" You know, what am I going to pick it up with my feet? What's your problem, man? And he was resisting me helping him. And it was even to the point where I said, you know, "Where's your cart?" He's like, "Well, I have a sore finger." And I said, "Oh, okay, so you want me, the guy that's paralyzed," I actually said this to him. I said, "You want me, the guy that's paralyzed, to go get the cart for you as a sore finger?" "I get it, I understand." And he's like, No. I'm like, No, sir, you stay there. I don't want you to hurt yourself." Yeah, right. And I went and got him the cart, and I loaded his 12 bags of soil for him. I was going to put them in his car, but somebody else came along and took it from me because he could see that I was about to strangle this guy. So
I should dedicate a whole episode to what it is that brings out the worst in people when they become customers. I don't know what it is.
Oh, you should. Oh, my goodness. I have stories till the cows come home.
So, Melanie, you mentioned experiencing discrimination at the Teachers College.
Yeah.
Have there been any other incidents of discrimination, like in the workplace or in the street, anything?
Well, when I was applying for my first couple of teaching jobs, I had a phone interview, and it was the principal, and she's like, "You're exactly what we're looking for," you know, and it was for a grade 7-8 split arts class, yada, yada. And I don't know what possessed me to disclose over the phone that I was visually impaired. I think I said, "Are you aware of the fact that I'm visually impaired?" She's like, "Oh." I said, "Was that an issue?" "Oh, not for me, but it will be for the parents." I was like, "Oh, what? Okay then." Not even there. Yeah, I didn't even go for the. So I learned very quickly not to disclose over the phone, and not. Yeah. And not to, you know, and obviously you go to prove yourself and do it in person. But anyways, that also, I think a lot of people figuring, how can somebody who's blind teach my child? I've had a lot of family members, but then I've also had family members of people I've worked with disabilities say, "Oh my gosh, you're the only one that gets them because I live it," right? So I've had both, but definitely that was the biggest discrimination.
There's sadly a very high proportion of the population of people with disabilities who have been victims of violence, harassment, verbal abuse, everything in between. It might have been 6 out of 10, but I might not have that statistic right, but it's very high. So I'm just going to ask you both if you've experienced just outright abuse based on being part of what they call the vulnerable sector. I'll start with you, Melanie.
Not physical, emotional, definitely. And again, it goes to that self-esteem aspect, wanting to be normal. I think I took a lot more than I should have emotionally, and it wore me down. It just made me believe that I was not good enough, that I was inferior. So that took a long time for me to come back out of.
Did anyone try that stunt where they wave their hand in front of your face or any of that kind of thing?
So many times, but that's or the biggest is how many fingers.
Oh, great! It's like I can still see you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yes.
So yeah.
So Rob, have you ever experienced any really real harassment, any abuse?
Not abuse from like an abuse point of view. More of when I'd be horsing around with somebody, they would take advantage of the fact that if they got behind me, then I couldn't respond to it. Sort of like, well, she's my wife now. She'll get behind me and she'll tickle me, and she knows I can't do anything because the way she'll stand, she'll basically lock my wheels, so I can't turn. So I'm at her mercy until she decides to stop tickling me. But from a physical abuse from like somebody in the community or out in the street or whatever, nothing like that, just because, one, I wouldn't take it. I would just punch back. But also, I think people saw me as, like, I have a big personality and I carry myself with authority, and I think they can sense that about me, so they don't want to come, they don't want to try that. The other thing is, I've had it from an emotional side of it, where I went to a prom once and it was on a boat, and people had to help me get on the boat and then get up to the level where the dance floor was. And then later on I heard that, I ruined their prom because they had to help me up and down the stairs. Oh, and man. I was like, it bothered me for the longest time, and it still does to this day. That's why I don't like to ask people for help, and I don't like to put people out, but I need to look at it as, well, I didn't ask them to take me up and down. They volunteered, so it's their own fault if their prom was ruined because of me, but it still affects me because I don't ask people for help just because of that.
And so say you just met someone who's acquired the same disability that you have, and you wanted to help them cope with the situation and to lead a fulfilling life. What would you say to them? How would you help them? We'll start with Melanie.
Just let them know that I get it. Let them talk and vent and express how they're feeling, and let them know it gets easier with time. I think the one thing that I struggled with mainly was patience, having patience, because I wanted it right now. I wanted to be normal. But I think just, try different things. Yes, you're going to fail. Yes, you're going to, with vision loss, you're going to fall over things. You're going to knock that coffee off the table several times before you realize, okay, wait a minute, I just got to take my time, or whatever it might be. To this day, I still do it, and it's 20-something years later. I think we just have to be patient with ourselves, but I definitely listen and encourage them to, not give up, because, there's always light at the end of the tunnel, part of the pun.
And Rob, so how would you mentor someone who acquired the same disability that you have?
I would just tell them not to let it stop them. Rather than be ashamed of it, rather than shy away from it, rather than try and run from it, just to accept it, because it's a part of who you are. And, don't let it stop you from trying whatever it is, within safety reasons, obviously. Like, don't try to, there's some people in wheelchairs that can go up and down stairs by themselves. Don't start out trying to do that, because you're going to kill yourself. But, don't let it, just because, there's a curb, just because there's whatever in your way, don't, the ramp seems too steep or whatever it is. If it's safe, try it. It's not going to, if you fail at it, you fail at it. You just get up and pick yourself up, dust off, and move along. if you let it stop you. I mean, there's stuff I wish I had done back when I first was in the wheelchair that I haven't done, and now it's not feasible to do it. You know, it's not feasible to try that thing because of, you know, my limitations that I've acquired over the time. But just don't let anything stop you. Just do it. Go out and do whatever it is within reason, obviously within safety factors. Make sure you're safe, but don't let stuff stop you, because you can accomplish anything. You know, you're just on four wheels. So.
All right, now we go to a commercial break. We'll be back with This Crazy World, how aberrant behavior shapes the society we live in. This show has been brought to you by Voices for Ability Radio. Voices for Ability is Canada's first internet-based radio station dedicated to individuals with disabilities, their caregivers, and allies. They are a source both entertaining and informative that focuses on issues faced by individuals with disabilities on a daily basis. All of their talk shows are produced and presented by individuals with disabilities and highlight the people, organizations, and resources that make a difference in the daily lives of individuals with disabilities. Join them for conversations about employment, relationships, advocacy, and accessibility, among other things, at www.v4aradio.com. And we're back. Melanie had to catch a bus, and so we're still here with Rob. Now, the rates of marriage in this part of the world are in steady decline as the rates of divorce and perpetual singlehood continue to rise. How have you and your wife succeeded while so many other couples failed? Do you have any advice for people on how to stay happily married?
Well, I mean, we're just newly married. I've only been married for like a month now. But, you know, I guess, I mean, the advice that I've been given by people who are long time married is, you know, be honest and, you know, just continue who you are, but, you know, be honest with your significant other and, you know, communicate and don't hold things in. If there's something that bothers you, mention it, because if you don't, it's just going to fester. And just like with any relationship, whether you're married or whether you're dating, if you just let it fester, then you're going to blow up at some point, and then it's going to create a bigger issue. So just get it out there in the open.
Yeah, exactly. You could end up saying things you don't really mean. But
because once you lose it, you run your mouth, and, you know, everybody knows, you know, when you're angry, you say things that you don't necessarily mean, but because you're angry, you're just running at the mouth, and you're not really thinking about what you say, and you can say a lot of hurtful things that you can't take back because you can't take words back in.
So a new record was broken in Toronto in 2018. 90 people have been killed here as of November 18th. What do you think is at the root of this problem with the increasing rate of homicide?
A lot of it, I think, has to do with gang violence. The other thing, too, is young adults and teenagers, they don't care. They have no respect for anybody. And to them, a lot of them, they don't know what it is to suffer consequences. So they do something, and either people don't punish them for whatever it is, or they try to punish them and the person doesn't listen or what have you, and then they just continue on through life like that, and they don't realize that you know, you shoot somebody, that bullet's got to go somewhere. Mm-hmm. It's, you know, none of them are expert shots. A lot of, you know, some of the murders or some of the deaths have been collateral damage, because these people don't know how to shoot, and they don't realize that, okay, I'm shooting at you, but I don't hit you. That bullet's going to stop somewhere, whether it's in a wall, whether it's in a car, whether it's in another person. They just don't realize the consequences of firing a gun. TV may, you know, I think TV and movies play a part in that, because you see people that, you know, somebody gets beat up. Let's not even say shooting. Somebody gets beat up in a TV show, and they take this insane beating, and they just keep getting back up, and they keep fighting more. And then you get punched in real life. The person that the person that received the punch, that's going to hurt, but it also hurts you punching them, because now you're connecting your fist with their jaw, bone on bone, essentially, because there's not a lot of tissue there. You're walking away hurt as well, and they don't realize, and like I said, there's no respect, there's no accountability, I work with kids and I work with teenagers, and I see it all the time. They just don't care. They go up against teachers, and the teachers back down, and their parents back down, everyone backs down against them, and they just think they can do whatever they want.
Yeah, it's interesting because there is this kind of through line of trauma now where their childhood was a utopia, and then they find out the real world is a dystopia. So growing up, they didn't keep score at the sporting events so that everyone can emerge with a participation trophy, and there's no discipline, there's endless indulgence, you get every video game you want. And then now they join the real world, they find out no one out there thinks you're special, you have to work hard for what you want, but even then it can be hard to get a job. Even if you have an education, it's just hard, and you can feel lonely and alienated out there, and they're not prepared for it.
Well, that's it. There's, like I work with kids at my church, and when it comes to disciplining them because they've done something wrong or whatever, I've had multiple people tell me, "Oh, you're too hard on the kids. Oh, you need to lighten up. Oh, you can't, it's not like I punish them harshly. I make them, like anything else, okay, stand in the corner. It worked for me. Okay, fine. You know what? Like, for example, last night we were doing kids club, and I said to the kids, okay, a lot of you haven't completed a section of workbook in a long time, so nobody gets games. You can't go to games until you complete a section of the workbook. So as one kid comes up to me and he shows me this one verse, and he's like, "Is this completing it?" And it was a very, very short verse. I said, "No, you have to do another section." So he says, "Okay, fine." So he goes away, comes back, shows me another section that he completed. So I'm like, okay. I flip back 2 pages. He skipped a long section. So I said to him, like, "You can't skip this section. You got to memorize this thing, and you can't go to game till it's done." Kid, he didn't get games because he didn't memorize it. He didn't like me the rest of the night. And other people would have said, "You're being too hard on him to make him do it." And I just basically said to him, "Look, you tried to cheat me. No, it's not going to fly that way. You might get away with that at school, but you aren't going to get away with it here. You tried to cheat me, so now you got to toe the line. You got to complete this section before you can move on." And I say to people that tell me I'm too hard on them, I say, look, nobody else is hard on these kids. Their parents don't discipline them. Their teachers don't discipline them. Somebody's got to. I was disciplined as a kid. I turned out okay. Mm-hmm. So I don't see why it's going to damage these kids today.
Yeah, they even developed this idea saying no to a child is like abusive language or something. But, when they get out in the real world, they're going to hear the word no quite a bit. It's going to hurt. So.
And they blame everybody else for it.
Yeah.
Yes, okay, there's a large segment of the population who they are underprivileged and everything like that. But, again, I know a lot of people who went to university, who graduated with a degree in whatever it is, and they still can't find a job. So it's not like them having gone to post-secondary school has helped them, because they can't get a job in the field that they graduated from because they're not qualified enough. But then they can't even just get a job working as whatever, at McDonald's or doing whatever, because they're overqualified for that. And the manager looks at it and says, well, these people are going to be bored in this job, so I'm not going to hire them because they're not going to show up. So they're screwed both ways.
Yeah.
And nobody gets that. And it's, yes, some people are more privileged than others, but when it gets out into the working world, it's kind of equal, I would say, to some extent, because it's just whatever the hardship is.
Yeah. And ultimately, merit always rears its ugly head. Well, depending on your point of view, you would see it as ugly, but everyone eventually finds out who has the most talent. And at the end of the day, I find it doesn't matter what their race or gender is, there's always the person who is the most appropriately qualified.
Exactly.
So they get promoted. So
you hope, except
yeah,
if they kiss butt and then they get promoted because they kiss butt. But that's a whole other thing.
Oh, that's a whole other issue.
Yeah.
So a scandal that broke in Toronto during the last few days is the incident at St. Michael's College School that consisted of a student being held down and sexually assaulted during a hazing ritual. So what are your thoughts on this? I mean, clearly this kid is going to be traumatized for life. I mean, this kind of incident would normally just happen in a maximum security prison, like San Quentin in the States. So, I mean, isn't it strange that this happened at that kind of school?
To that extent, yes, I think it is. To the extent that there was hazing, period, no. I mean, you just got to look at what you create. First of all, you're putting a bunch of teenage boys together. That's a bad idea right off the start, because teenage boys do stupid things. You know, it's anybody can admit it. I can think of dumb stuff I did when I was a teenager. Yeah, me too. And, you know, I should have been dead 10 times over just because of the stupid stuff I did. But not only that, I mean, you say things, once you get in that mentality of a group, you feel like you have more power than you actually do. So, of course, you're going to say and you're going to do things that you normally wouldn't do if you're by yourself. So you're putting all these boys together. In some situations, they're not being supervised, like in locker rooms and stuff like that, because you can't have the coach wandering around because that's just going to look creepy, and people are going to question that. So you're there, you're unsupervised, so stupid stuff's going to happen anyways. But then on top of that, you're putting a bunch of jocks together, and you're putting them with kids that aren't jocks. And I'm sorry, jocks have a tendency to pick on people that are not jocks.
Sure, yeah.
And it just depends on the group of athletes as to how bad they are. You know, everybody hears about the football players, how they're the worst, but, you know, hockey players are just as bad. Baseball players, they have their own component too. So when you're mixing all boys, athletes and non-athletes, the athletes are going to pick on the non-athletes 9 times out of 10. Of course, I'm generalizing here. Mm-hmm. But the fact that the hazing happened is not a surprise. The fact that it happened to the degree that it did, that blows my mind, because I'm wondering what has to go through your head to think that this is something that's fun or that you can get a laugh out of this. You know, in it happening in prisons, usually it happens to a certain type of criminal in prison. Yeah. You know, I think of, well, Jeffrey Dahmer, let's take him for example, because it happened to him. Yeah. He was in protective custody, released into general population. Within a day, that's how he died in prison, was because of the same thing they did to this poor teenage boy. But what is going through your head to make you think that that's acceptable or fun? I don't even want to be in that person's head. And yet we don't hold criminals to a high standard, but we would expect more from these kids whose parents pay $20,000 a year. You know. Well, even you expect more from them because they're not in that prison atmosphere. Yeah. You know, they're not. You know, usually the people that probably do it in prison are the ones that are there for life. So what do they have to lose? Yeah. They lose a privilege, or they end up, you know, in solitary for a month or 2 months or whatever, or they have another charge brought against them, but they're already serving a life sentence. So really, what is that other charge? What does it matter? It doesn't make a difference to them. They're still in jail till the day they die. So you would expect even just, the whole where they're coming from as family people, supposedly well-to-do families who, you know, you hope that they have a proper upbringing. Not only that, they should be civilized people because they're in society, but obviously not. Yeah, it suddenly makes me feel a little bit better about the little bit of verbal abuse I got in grade 9 in public school. Yeah, I mean, I was made fun of through grade 9 and through 10 every single day I went to school, but that never happened to me. You know, the worst that happened to me is, you know, I got into a fight or two.
Yeah,
but
right.
that was it. You know, thankfully I didn't get assaulted like that. You know, that's horrible, and you know, all my feelings go out to the person that happened to, because I wouldn't wish that upon my enemy.
Yeah, me neither. And on that note, I'd like to thank you for listening, and on behalf of myself and Rob Steves, thank you for joining us. This is the Flan Foundation for Mental Health. Bye for now.